You should arrest these people who are violating the law. You should protect the judges. I agree that there was general language against violence, but not a single Democrat senator that I ever saw in this committee was willing to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland to account for flagrantly disregarding the federal criminal law, because the Biden administration agreed with the protesters and I think wanted those justices harassed at their home.
I really appreciate that you've now shifted the accusation you made earlier. Your accusation was that we were silent in the face of protests at Supreme Court justices' homes. Again, we joined together in a bipartisan way, not only to condemn that, but to pass legislation to extend round-the-clock security protection, literally days. It was introduced May 5th, passed the Senate in a bipartisan fashion on May 9th. So if you're saying that we didn't criticize
Did the
Merrick
Biden
Garland,
DOJ arrest a single person under this law?
You are now changing the
No, that is what I said. That is what I said.
Again, I'll pull the record.
Did the Biden DOJ arrest even one?
Again.
The answer is no.
My point to you is the accusation that the Democrats on this committee do not care about the safety of federal judges. I did not interrupt you, sir. I would appreciate if you let me finish. I am sick and tired of hearing the kind of heated partisan rhetoric, which is one of the reasons why we have such divisions in this country. The attacks we see from the President of the United States of America trolling and dragging judges through is what we should be talking about, that puts people in danger. I'm simply taking issue with the claim that you made at the top that people on the Democratic side of the aisle do not care about the safety and the security of judges and said nothing.
We're diving into one of the most heated exchanges from a recent Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, where Senator Cory Booker went head-to-head with Senator Ted Cruz. Booker didn't hold back, calling Cruz's accusation a patent lie and exposing the hypocrisy in Republican attacks. This wasn't just political theater. It was a clash over truth, rhetoric, and the very safety of our judges. Let's break it down.
I would make two brief observations. Number one, it is interesting as our Democrat colleagues defend these nationwide injunctions that neither of them made any reference to the fact that the number of nationwide injunctions issued in the first 4 months is greater than the entire 20th century and is greater than all of the nationwide injunctions issued against Bush, Obama, and Biden combined, nor did they address the disturbing fact that of the 40 universal injunctions that have been issued in the last 4 months, 35 of them came from the same 5 judicial districts. There is a reason for this. Blue state attorneys general and radical leftist groups are seeking out affirmatively radical judges who they know will impose their own policy preferences. If it were simply, as our Democrat colleagues said, judges following the law, then you wouldn't have to keep going to the same radical judges over and over and over again, because judges across the board should do that. But the litigants know exactly who the zealots are that are on the bench, and that's who they are seeking out. I will also point out that the discussion about the urgency of protecting the safety of judges. Listen, I agree. We should protect the safety of every federal judge, but it is interesting because my Democrat colleagues were utterly silent during 4 years of the Biden administration when you had violent mobs outside the homes of Supreme Court justices unhappy with the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs, and the Biden Justice Department refused to enforce federal law and protect the justices. And my Democrat colleagues were perfectly happy with Supreme Court justices being threatened if they disliked the rulings that were coming from the Supreme Court justices. Unlike my colleagues, I believe we should protect judges regardless of whether I agree with them or not. We should protect their safety. And every time you hear a Democrat senator talk about protecting judges from acts of violence, you ought to ask them, why did they not have a word to say about the Biden Justice Department allowing mobs to threaten the families and children of Supreme Court justices night after night after night while Biden's Attorney General refused to follow the law? And with that,
Mr. Chairman, would you indulge me for a moment?
We indulge you every moment.
I appreciate that act of generosity. It's just something you said that I think is actually dangerous and should be addressed, and you're welcome. But when Judge Anderol was killed in New Jersey, the Republican colleagues in the Senate, their outpouring of support, their outpouring of concern, they're willing to work together on a bipartisan bill was extraordinary. It shows the truth of this institution that despite some of the fiery rhetoric that you were sowing, we're really a bipartisan, working bipartisanship. Cornyn and Coons, after the incidents you're talking about, got together and actually passed a bill to better protect our Supreme Court justices, many of whom are friends of ours. You know, Gorsuch and I disagree on a lot of stuff. I knew his wife before he did. We studied together at Oxford. This implication that there was silence when there were threats on their people's houses is absolutely absurd. I remember the rhetoric and the comments, the concern from Coons. I actually distinctly remember you, Chairman, on more than once condemning those attacks on Republican-appointed jurists. To say things like that feeds just the partisanship in this institution and feeds the fiery rhetoric. And it's just plain not true. It's just plain not true. And I think you know that, but we can pull from the record from my colleagues in real time, literally days afterwards, condemning it. There's a lot of substantive things to say here, but to think that the lack of humanity when people's homes are being threatened was not in existence, I think that's unfair and really concerns me that you would say that in the way that you did.
Well, I thank my colleague from New Jersey. I will note, as John Adams observed, that facts are stubborn things. And it is existing federal law, 18 U.S.C. section 1507, that makes it a crime to protest at a judge's home. And the law provides whoever with the intent of interfering with, obstructing, or impeding the administration of justice, or with the intent or of influencing any judge, juror, witness, or court officer in the discharge of his duty, pickets or parades in or near a building housing a court of the United States, in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge, juror, witness, or court officer, or with such intent uses any sound truck or similar device, or resorts to any other demonstration in or near any such building or residence, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year, or both. That is federal criminal law. Night after night after night, angry mobs were outside the Supreme Court justices' homes, and in the entire course of it, the Biden Justice Department prosecuted nobody. We had the Attorney General sitting at that table, and multiple Republican senators asked him, why are you not enforcing the law? What they are doing is a crime. And my friend from New Jersey said, it is a lie to say we, the Democrats, condone this. I would challenge, my friend, find a single Democrat senator on this committee holding the Attorney General to account for not enforcing this law. I was here at those hearings, and I do not recall a single Democrat senator saying to the Attorney General, you should arrest these people who are violating the law. You should protect the judges. I agree that there was general language against violence, but not a single Democrat senator that I ever saw in this committee was willing to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland to account for flagrantly disregarding the federal criminal law, because the Biden administration agreed with the protesters and I think wanted those justices harassed at their home.
I really appreciate that you've now shifted the accusation you made earlier. Your accusation was that we were silent in the face of protests at Supreme Court justices' homes. Again, we joined together in a bipartisan way, not only to condemn that, but to pass legislation to extend round-the-clock security protection, literally days. It was introduced May 5th, passed the Senate in a bipartisan fashion on May 9th. So if you're saying that we didn't criticize Merrick Garland...
Did the Biden DOJ arrest a single person under this law?
You are now changing the...
No, that is what I said. That is what I said.
Again, I'll pull the record.
Did the Biden DOJ arrest even one?
Again...
The answer is no.
My point to you is the accusation that the Democrats on this committee do not care about the safety of federal judges. I did not interrupt you, sir. I would appreciate if you let me finish. I am sick and tired of hearing the kind of heated partisan rhetoric, which is one of the reasons why we have such divisions in this country. The attacks we see from the President of the United States of America trolling and dragging judges through is what we should be talking about, that puts people in danger. I'm simply taking issue with the claim that you made at the top that people on the Democratic side of the aisle do not care about the safety and the security of judges and said nothing. You said we were silent after people's houses were protested. That is a patent lie, sir. We were not silent. We took action. We joined in a bipartisan way to protect those judges, as was done in a bipartisan way to protect a New Jersey judge after their horrific attack at their home. So I see you now trying to shift the debate to whether we talk to an attorney general. I'm simply taking issue with this accusation that somehow we Democrats are so bad because we don't call out threats to our to our judicial colleagues. And that is wrong. You could change the argument now that you want, but what you said was patently not true and was in fact a patent lie.
So I do enjoy the fact that my colleague from New Jersey raises his voice and says it's a patent lie and says he's doing so in defense of lowering the rhetoric. There is some irony to doing those two together. I'll point out that in the entire course of those remarks, Senator Booker did not dispute the central point I made, which is the Biden Justice Department arrested 0 people, prosecuted 0 people, for violating the criminal law, and every Democrat senator on this committee was silent about it. And this was an ongoing pattern for months. And I would note also that the senator from New Jersey clutched his pearls about language threatening judges, and yet I do not recall a single Democrat senator of this committee saying a word when Chuck Schumer went to the steps of the Supreme Court and threatened the safety of the Supreme Court justices by name, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and he said, "You have unleashed the whirlwind and you will pay the price." And not a single Democrat senator had a word to say about this. And so their outrage is selective. And I will give my colleague from New Jersey a chance to just answer a simple yes-no question. Should the Biden Justice Department have enforced the criminal law against protesting at a justice's home? Yes or no?
So the rank hypocrisy of Chuck Schumer apologizing the next day and you holding that standard for him and not for your president, who you actually rightfully described when you were running against him in a primary. I would love to run those tapes of how you perfectly talked about the danger of our president and his rhetoric. But now you are failing, in fact, blind to the very things you're accusing Chuck Schumer of. I don't think Donald Trump would know an apology if it hit him in the head. Never has said apologizing. So again, you are very, very, sir, very, very deep into the waters of hypocrisy in your criticisms of Chuck Schumer.
So let the record reflect that Spartacus did not answer the question and did not tell us whether the criminal law should be enforced, because he knows the answer is yes. And he knows that the Biden Department of Justice was being wildly political and partisan in refusing to enforce the law because they disagreed with the Supreme Court justices' rulings. I have also, in addition to Senator Durbin, who's given his opening statement, I have a written opening statement from Chairman Grassley without objection.
Senate hearings often feature sharp words and partisan contrasts, but the recent clash between Senator Cory Booker and Senator Ted Cruz stood out as one of the most telling exchanges about the state of American politics. At its heart, the argument was not just about judges or protests. It was about honesty, hypocrisy, and the way selective outrage has poisoned our national dialogue. Cory Booker, with his characteristic passion, accused Cruz of uttering a patent lie. That phrase landed hard because it cut straight to the core of the problem. Republicans like Cruz are weaponizing accusations while ignoring their own complicity in toxic political rhetoric. The exchange began when Cruz accused Democrats of remaining silent after protests outside Supreme Court justices' homes. He framed the Biden Justice Department as unwilling to enforce the law and claimed that Democrats looked the other way when judges faced threats. Cory Booker, refusing to let that charge stand, reminded the chamber that Democrats had in fact acted, and acted in a bipartisan way. Legislation to protect judges after the horrific murder of a New Jersey judge's son was passed with support across the aisle. To claim otherwise, Booker thundered, was a lie. Not just an exaggeration, not just spin, but a patent lie. Booker's words mattered because they cut through the fog of Republican misdirection. The truth is, Democrats have consistently worked to strengthen security around judges. What Republicans like Cruz are doing is cherry-picking moments, pretending silence where there was none, and then using that selective memory to smear opponents. Booker was right to call it what it was, gaslighting, pure and simple. But Cruz didn't stop there. He pivoted, as he so often does, to dredge up an old speech from Senator Chuck Schumer, where Schumer, in fiery language, warned conservative justices that their rulings would spark consequences. Cruz, with the typical flair of a practiced culture warrior, suggested that Democrats had been complicit in threatening judges all along. Booker's answer? Clear, cutting, and devastating. Schumer apologized. Donald Trump never has. The difference between making a rhetorical mistake and correcting it versus making a habit of dangerous, violent rhetoric is night and day. Republicans know this, and yet they pretend not to. What this moment revealed was the deep irony in Cruz's attack. Here was a senator defending a former president who has, time and again, directly attacked judges, prosecutors, and entire institutions of government. Donald Trump has incited his supporters to view the judicial system as illegitimate whenever it dares to hold him accountable. From tweets blasting judges to campaign rallies targeting prosecutors by name, Trump's rhetoric is not just reckless, it is dangerous. And yet, Cruz and his Republican colleagues find no problem with it. Cory Booker's frustration was palpable because this double standard corrodes public trust. Republicans will scream about Democratic rhetoric but stay silent when Trump endangers judges and their families. Booker highlighted that hypocrisy perfectly. He reminded the committee that the threat Trump poses is not hypothetical. It's real, it's ongoing, and it has already put lives at risk. To ignore that reality while clutching pearls over a line from Chuck Schumer years ago is beyond disingenuous. It's insulting to the American people. This is why Booker's confrontation resonated so strongly. It wasn't just about defending Democrats against a false charge. It was about exposing the larger pattern of Republican dishonesty. Cory Booker, in his speech, captured what many Americans feel. They are sick and tired of the toxic partisan rhetoric that puts lives in danger and corrodes the legitimacy of our democracy. But he also made it clear that Democrats have not been silent. They have acted to protect judges, they have supported bipartisan legislation, and they will continue to defend the independence of the judiciary even when Republicans try to undermine it for political gain. Cruz, predictably, tried to spin the moment back into a yes or no trap, demanding that Booker agreed the Justice Department should have prosecuted protesters. But Booker wisely refused to play that game, because this was never about a yes or no answer. It was about the bad faith way Republicans frame the debate. They pretend the Justice Department is partisan, when in fact it has consistently faced political pressure from both sides. What Cruz wanted was a soundbite. What Booker delivered was truth. Let's not miss the broader context here. At a time when threats against judges are on the rise, the rhetoric we hear from political leaders matters more than ever. When Republicans minimize Trump's attacks on the judiciary while feigning outrage over Schumer's apology, they are sending a message. Threats only matter when they can be used as a partisan weapon. That selective outrage makes our judges less safe, not more. Booker's speech should be remembered not just as a fiery rebuttal to Cruz, but as a defense of honesty in political discourse. His willingness to call out a patent lie on the spot is exactly what Democrats need to do more often. For too long, Republicans like Cruz have relied on misdirection, assuming their opponents will respond meekly. Booker showed that the best response is to name the lie, reject the false premise, and expose the hypocrisy. In the long arc of this debate, Democrats must continue to emphasize the difference between protecting judges in practice and exploiting judicial threats for political theater. Booker made that distinction clear. Democrats acted, Republicans accused. Democrats sought solutions, Republicans sowed division. And when confronted with that record, Cruz had no real defense except to change the subject. This clash also highlights the stakes in the upcoming elections. If Republicans are rewarded for this kind of dishonesty, it will only embolden them to keep playing the same game, accusing Democrats of things they themselves are guilty of. But if voters reward honesty, courage, and the defense of democracy, leaders like Cory Booker will have the political mandate to continue standing up for truth. At the end of the day, this hearing was more than partisan fireworks. It was a window into the core struggle of our times: truth versus lies, accountability versus gaslighting, democracy versus authoritarian doublespeak. Cory Booker chose truth, accountability, and democracy. Ted Cruz chose lies, gaslighting, and blind loyalty to Donald Trump. That is the story Americans need to remember. And that is why this fiery exchange matters so much.